Her brother hadn't been living a double life, and I don't know, he wasn't who he appeared to be, and
to vow before God to be loyal to each other, and that loyalty was broken.
Remember when the Duggars had that whole thing happen back in 2015 when everything came out about Josh Duggar and people were like, why isn't Anna leaving him? Why is she staying with him? What's going on with Anna? Well, I actually was thinking about this today because I was looking through Anna's sister's Instagram and noticed that Anna had made a comment on her sister's Instagram, which basically said, the perfect couple in regards to Susanna with her husband. If you don't know who Susanna is Anna Duggar's younger sister who is not a fundamentalist, has left the world, had a baby out of wedlock. And Jim Bob Duggar was not okay with that. In fact, Jim Bob Duggar would not have approved that they went to the wedding, but they still went, and which was last year. Jill was supposed to, or was interested in helping Susanna be a midwife for her pregnancy. Jim Bob forbade it. So Anna is still close with Susanna, which I think is interesting, even though Jim Bob is so anti-Susanna. And I started thinking about her sister and her brother, who are not in this world, who wanted her to leave, but they didn't get her to get out, and why the Duggars might have made her stay, and why her parents might have made her stay, and why did Anna stay? And I started thinking about this, and I was digging through some old screenshots. I found some on Reddit, and then I started looking back at this video by the Duggars on Fox, and it was them sort of downplaying what Josh had done. And I was like, is it really a surprise that Anna stayed?
You know, every family has things happen in the families. And some families maybe have darker things than others, but everybody deals with something.
But what about
I think it's been recently said that what Josh did was inexcusable, but it was not unforgivable.
So in that interview, Jim Bob was like more concerned about the records of his sons going public. He was really upset about that. And he was actually talking about this like conspiracy about how the people at the town didn't like him and she was retiring and she was going to release the information. And he even talked about how he was going to sue her. And then we already know how that worked out. They basically dismissed almost everything against that lawsuit and said that they can't be sued, and they didn't act outside of the realm of, you know, the Freedom of Information Act. And then he just sort of downplayed it and acted like these things just happen in families. And yeah, sure, true enough, but most families aren't in a cult that teaches women that it's their fault that it happens to them. And most don't have a family member that doesn't give them any help. I mean, he even talked about in that same interview about how they didn't send him to traditional treatment because they felt like it wasn't going to be effective for him. And so instead they opted for something Christian based, which clearly did not work. So after they were interviewed, they forced the girls to go on, and it was even worse because they were defending their brother.
like in Josh's case, he was a young boy in puberty, and a little too curious about girls, and that got him into some trouble, and he made some bad choices.
And then you had Anna basically on TLC just sort of talking about how she was going to stay with him.
I knew that my only hope was to cling to my faith, because I know if I went off of what I was feeling, I would turn a mess into a disaster. And so I think in the stun and in the shock of everything, I was just praying, God, help me to know how to respond to all of this. We needed help. And I was just praying that God would give the help and the wisdom that we needed to know.
So you had the parents saying it happens in every family, essentially, and then you have a father basically blaming the government for releasing the information, downplaying it by saying it happens in every family, and being like, it's not that big of a deal and we can forgive him.
We're failures. You know, here we've tried to raise our kids to do what's right, to know what's right.
First time he came to you.
You know, I talked to somebody that worked at one of those juvenile the success rate is not very good. It was a situation where we felt like our son's heart had gone astray.
And it's not that big of a deal and we can forgive him, right? So you're dealing with all of this. And then in the middle of that, you have Anna, who is pregnant, who has about to have her 4th child, and her family wants her to leave, right? They want her to leave, and she doesn't, because the Duggars don't want her to leave. The Duggars and her parents don't believe in divorce. And it's more important for Anna to stay because of the image that it would portray to the family than it would actually mean to protect her or her children from what Josh might do in the future. So back right before the whole counting on came out, this was an interview thing that came out where the whole family sat down and they all sort of talked about how they were feeling, and they were feeling betrayed. And Jessa shared a post on Facebook, and Anna's brother Daniel got a little feisty in the comments because he was just so upset with Josh, because he, in Daniel's opinion, was doing the same things over and over and over again. In one comment, he says, "You have to confess and forsake your sin to have mercy, not sin, confess, and repeat." In relation to Josh continually making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And, also talking about how, tell me how you would feel if someone cheated on your sister, brought so much disgrace to you and your family, and then when you've done that, can you imagine how he must be feeling, right? And then he also talked about how even though he did confess, he didn't really he only confessed because he got caught. So he says he did because he confessed. Confessing and getting caught are 2 different things. You want to know what happens when you cover your sin? Maybe you should go read a Bible instead of beating people over the head with it. Basically about Josh and the family constantly talking and being hypocritical about their faith when they're not actually they're not walking in, they're not practicing what they preach. They're judging everyone else, but they have all of this stuff in their closet, right? And at one point someone asked him, if he could go get her, and he said, "I've told her I would pay for her to move out here with me and pay for the kids." I don't think Josh will see that as a big deal and be truly broken till that happens. I bet my life on the fact that Josh has not come to true brokenness yet. So he wanted his sister to come move with her, and she didn't want to because it was about his parents. He said, "My parents are preaching for Anna to stay with him. They're more interested in how their daughter getting a divorce will make them look than they are in trying to truly get Josh some help and getting Anna and the kids out of there until he's gotten help." So the Duggars and the Kellers didn't want Anna to get a divorce because in their world, you can't get a divorce because you're stuck together like glue. Even if your spouse cheats on you in the IBLP, the women are taught that it's their fault. And some of the things coming out at the time were basically saying that Anna blamed herself for what Josh did. And she blamed herself because the IBLP taught her that if her husband strays or he's not satisfied in the marriage, it's because she didn't cook enough, she didn't clean enough, she didn't get joyfully available enough. And they have this really bizarre rule about what's called entitlement. So a man can do and say whatever he wants, but if a woman wants her husband to do or say something, or say I want my husband to be more available to me, I want him to be more emotionally available to me, I want him to sit down and play with the kids more, that would be considered entitlement. A woman does not get to ask her husband to do anything, and she should just be happy that her husband did anything. So a woman doesn't have the right to say anything. So she's not entitled to leave. She's not entitled to say anything about whether or not the husband's doing anything wrong, and she just has to deal with the bad behavior because it's her fault anyway. And then the Duggars and the Kellers don't want her to get divorced because it'll look bad on them in the public eye. I mean, imagine that. And she's so brainwashed from growing up in that she just decides to stay. He also responded about prayer, and he said, "Thanks for praying. I told her I would go get her and let her and the children stay with me. She said she's staying where she's at, but I won't stop trying to get that pig out of our family." And when someone responded that said, maybe Anna's parents really believe that their marriage can be saved, they don't seem like people that care what others think. And he said, I was raised by them. Trust me, it's all they care about. So he cared more about what other people thought of them than actually like Anna's well-being and Anna's safety. So, and he went as far as calling Josh a pig repeatedly. So you have a family like Daniel, a brother like Daniel, that wants to help his sister, but his parents are in a cult and they've indoctrinated her sister into a cult. She's married into a cult. And both cult leaders, the dads, are saying you can't get married, you can't get divorced, even though by this time she's 27 years old, she's a mother of 3, she has all the legal rights to do whatever she wants. But in the eyes of this cult, she's the property of her husband, and her husband gets to dictate what happens. And she is so conditioned to believe that her failure in either not doing enough for her husband or not loving God enough is the reason why he strayed. And now I see her commenting on Susanna's post and saying the perfect couple. And when she's looking at a couple that's out there in the world in an equal marriage with a husband that is of equal value, and you know they're not living on their parents' property because her husband is disgraced, right? Anna's living on her in-laws' property in a converted building into a home with no windows. It's nice on the inside, but it's not, it's not probably what they wanted, right? They moved off of their own property. They sold their house because Josh didn't have a job. He's been sued. He doesn't have stable work. Nobody wants to deal with him. And she stays in the situation and now has had 6 children with this man because she doesn't think that she can go. And it all comes back to how this family has coddled Josh forever. And I just keep hoping that maybe Susanna or even Daniel can still remind her that she can leave. But the truth is, she didn't leave, not just because of her faith, but because her parents and the Duggars wouldn't let her. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.